spare paper that's not tracing paper. And let's try to figure out some possible, that is recording, possible movements of things, of a face. What a face can do. That's that round buddy of mine. So for ease of visual stuff, we have this guy. Or we can have an elongated guy. This guy's harder to attribute motion and stuff to because it's all the same. It's equal distance. It's more similar. Hello, Rosmond, 2017. Then you also have square guys. Square guys have a little bit of motion that can happen, and you can also have it be a little bit more motion that's directed by the angles that exist. But I think what I might mess with today, thank you, Stuff by Patsy, for saying that she loves my work. That's a nice thing to hear. I might mess with having this figure sort of moving back and forth. That's sort of playing with, what if I combine things? What if instead of having it purely shifting over like this, what if it's twisting as it's doing that? So instead of it just going from this guy to that guy, it would be something more of it twists as it lands here and then twists back. So how's that going to look? It would make for a more interesting look to it, but it's going to be more work. Hello, Night Owl Karen. If I remember correctly, you're in the Philippines or Malaysia, and it is coming up on being super late for you. So what does it look like if I do have this thing? Where does it need to twist? Because if it's starting to twist, then you have that element twisting over and then coming up on this side. I think it might be that it has to sort of be exaggerated on either end. In this case, it's just sort of got to be, and then popping back in this direction. I'm trying to figure this out a little bit. Oh, yeah, the Philippines got hit by typhoons. I've forgotten about that. I've seen some photos. Hope that you're doing okay. And that the people that you know that are there are doing okay. Okay, I think this is what I'm gonna mess with. And there's a decent chance that I get confused as I'm working. This guy. The other options. Twist around like that, but I think I'm gonna mess with this one. Which means I need to start with it. Moderate size, move up, twist, lean back, twist upwards. Sort of go like this. Okay, that's the plan. Stay safe. In the Philippines, I've seen some images, and it's a lot. I get distracted with domestic issues and forget about international things happening. Right now, we're just dealing with people unwilling to. Well, hello, Anne. The United States is dealing with. And Europe, but United States is what I know the specifics of. Just hello, Freen. Incredibly high numbers of COVID, where we got like an additional 1 million cases in the last week or something. Let's see if turning this just a tiny bit off. And Donald Trump is not conceding. Hello in Chile. I am recording. Okay. Brushes have been acting up because I haven't been taking care of them. Okay. I'm using tracing paper. This was some bulk stuff that I bought off of Blick because it was the cheapest way to get the amount that I needed. But you can get pads of tracing paper from like any art store if you want to get a larger quantity. You can get reams of it, which is typically what I do. Reams of like 500 sheets, but I got like, I forget how many, but a giant stack. I'll crop this a little bit tighter. As I'm working. Thank you for saying you love my dedication to my art. It's a nice thing. I don't know if it's more humid in here or something, but these are drying particularly fast. Bonjour. Soleil DGT. Hello. Hi, Neely. Neely. You probably can't see it in your streaming bit, but there's a... I can see when the ink isn't dry. There we go. Hello, Miss Finfin. Hello. Aniamas. I always forget your specific given name or what you go by. And hello, Evelyn. Form of this will become a little bit more clear when this sort of stuff starts to return. Hello, LWP Studios. Hello, Marine. For 5 seconds, that is 75. What's on my shirt? It's a pattern. It's a smaller version of Blockhead's pattern. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's the printout. I work at 15 frames per second. So right now I am at about 2/3 of a second. For whatever reason, this print has it doubled up, which might have been my fault. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the file that I uploaded for it, but it's a pretty fine print, and part of it was testing whether or not the printer would handle it correctly. But I don't know if I made the mistake because I haven't gone back and looked at the file. Because I might have accidentally uploaded it twice and offset it slightly or something else. I'm not 100% sure. Thank you, Dean Cheney. And thank you, Vivienda? Vivienda? I don't know if your name's Vivienda or something else. Let's redo that bit. I'm using a brush and ink. Someone asked what pen I'm using. So I have to keep taking it off screen because I have to dip it in the ink. With any sort of brush a lot of the process of getting it to be as smooth or getting the line quality that you want is knowing how much ink or paint to pick up, and that takes a bit of time to learn. It's largely about feeling. Hello, Salahi. If that's not your name and I'm pronouncing it with an inappropriate sort of accent on it, please tell me. As though offend people what their names are. It's nice to have someone say your name correctly. You can also laugh at whatever my attempt is, and if it's something completely else, like you're referencing something and it's not your name at all, that's a funny thing for me to get tripped up on. Okay, that's your last name. Did I say it with the weird accent that sounded like a white American dude trying to pick up on what your name might be pronounced like? Okay. I'll just draw. Thank you. Apparel yo. Apparel yo. I'm not sure. We are at 1 second of animation. Once I finish up. April. Okay. Well, thank you, April. We're at 15. It might be hard to see, but I number the frames as I'm working. Sometimes I mess up on the numbering, which isn't particularly consequential, but sometimes I get tripped up when I'm scanning and I think I have the wrong number of things happening. The time that it takes varies depending on what it is that the animation is. This one is not particularly complex to figure out how I want to make it return to its original position, which might take a little bit of time. But, that's not nice. But this one, how long have I been working? Been working about 45 minutes. But that was also sketching and concepting a little bit. But this will probably take a few hours in total. A little bit longer. Thank you, memo pad. Thank you, April, for the compliments. Hope your meeting goes well. I'm also a millennial, which is a broad age range. Thank you, graphic Omelia or Gruffy. I'm not sure. Thank you. Did I do this one? It's a little messy. Hello in Peru. I don't know too much about Peruvian stuff. This is tracing paper. Thank you, Andres. Andre. Again, sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. It's a constant through line. Me being unsure of the pronunciation of people's names based on their handles. Oh, yeah. Now this brush should behave a little bit better. One minute? What's 60 times 15? That's 900. 900 drawings for a minute. Hello, Crack Rock Cereal. Sorry, I said 900 is the number of frames that it takes for me for how I work, but that might vary a bit depending on who it is that is animating, and if you're doing it in a professional context, it varies. Because typically you don't animate at, if you're doing hand-drawn animation for long-form things, you animate at different frame rates depending on what the action's like and what your budget is, stuff like that. Thank you, Wandering Humanoid. I think that you've watched some of these before. He's someone who said as humanoid or something like. Oh no, it's someone who says human or something. Hola, Rosemont, 2017. Hello, Oscar, or Oscarad. So now what I want to do, as this is sort of curling back up, is I want to have a squash and stretch happening. So I'm going to start to, as this closes in, move this bit out. Hello, Meta Design. Hello, Savannah Stewart. I was gonna say I have some friends in Savannah, but the friend I have, hello Edgar, friend I have that was in Savannah has just recently moved to Atlanta. Hello, Arthur. Sometimes I just sort of work and see how it goes. This time around, I started with these sketches and decided to work with a longer figure, and I was messing with this idea of having it sort of shift in this direction, but I like the idea of adding some element to that, so I decided to try and twist it, and ended up thinking about having it twist this direction, sort of spiraling. So it still is achieving that change in position, but it's doing it a little bit more interestingly. And now I have to figure out how best to return to this spot. And I think it might be having it squash up and then becoming a smaller circular guy that then can roll over and stretch back up this direction. But the speed on that might be a little bit weird, the movement. I'm not sure. Sometimes when I do a loop, I don't think about the fact that it's starting back into motion following, and that's not always the best result. Sometimes it has a little bit of an awkward movement to it. Where it sort of like pauses and then starts. It's not as fluid. So I'm not sure. Building a portfolio? I don't really have a portfolio exactly. What my college professor said for building portfolios was to, I forget, start with something moderately strong, then a bit stronger, and then stronger and stronger. And then, but don't like finish with your strongest thing, but not your, I don't know. It varies what those sorts of pieces of advice are. How many frames so far? This is my 26th frame. I'm not using a pencil currently. I'm using a brush dipped in ink. This is a pretty cheap brush as well. As far as building a portfolio, make it something that's memorable in some way. Sometimes I do have a portfolio. It's a weird one. This is Sumi ink. Not it's Japanese, not Chinese. You can find my weird portfolio if you search for it on Vimeo, or if you go to my non-TraceLoops website, matthiasbrown.com. You can see other things there that are a bit more net artish and a bit more absurd. made a resume and sent it out on VHS as a novelty, which can work and not work. I'm working with the idea that you have a novelty sort of thing. That's your hook or something to get people's attention. I liked it more, the idea that it was some sort of story that I could have. Like, this guy, he submitted it. That it's something memorable. But really depends on who you are, where you're sending stuff, what sort of resume. My reasoning for doing that VHS deal was partly, I was like, if someone gets this and enjoys this, then I feel like we'd work decently together. Let's do one more of these guys. Hello, Miss Finfin. Did you already say hello earlier? I feel like I said Finfin earlier. Developing the portfolio, just work a lot and see what you end up with. Take any advice from people with some grain of salt. My advice to you is to not take everyone's advice literally. To work hard, take opportunities to learn, don't slack on things. It's really easy to, and appealing. I did it a bunch. It's the sort of thing where you have to learn for yourself. There's one thing I have learned, it's that I sort of have to learn things for myself. If I were to collaborate with an artist of any kind, it would probably be someone like Madlib. Ideally, it would be something where it's like, I am not familiar with how to do this thing. And it's someone who just is further away from what I'm doing. There's a sort of inclination to collaborate with people who are similar, but it's not always the best outcome if you're like, okay, it just sort of, let me see where that sort of start baseline is. I think I'm actually going to start pulling some of these first frames out so that I'm not doing weird bits to things. Sometimes if people are too similar, and too complementary, what you end up with isn't anything particularly new or interesting. Hello, Reno. I say artist just because it's broad and less defined, and that's how I tend to like to work, is more broad. I don't think anyone who knows my work as it stands today would be as inclined to say he's a graphic designer and that's what he is. You can go eat something. You don't have to watch all of this. This has been going for over an hour. And really, you don't owe me anything. You don't have to apologize for going and eating stuff as well. I'm just getting it. I appreciate you being considerate. But you're watching this live stream and you don't owe me anything for doing that. Ooh. There's probably a delay between when you're posting stuff and when I'm responding. There is a delay. That's why it's so dark in here. The sun went down, but I don't have my light on. favorite logo type. I don't know if I have a favorite logo type. I like various stuff that Saul Bass did. Really like the noisy sound. What are you getting? I'm guessing you're getting some feedback from my phone. Saul Bass, Saulbass. He did a lot of noise shouldn't be gone. Oh, sorry. You're saying that background noise. It's probably stuff coming from my phone. Saul Bass did a lot of logos, and he also did a lot of title sequences. I don't speak French. Thank you. I'm not sure what you're saying. I'm not French. I do not speak French. Or are you talking to that other person asking if they're French? My bad. He did work with Alfred Hitchcock. But he also did things like the Bell South logo and the Girl Scouts of America logo. I like both of those. I'm pretty sure that was him. If not, it was Paul Rudd. Not Paul Rudd. What's the Paul guy? I don't want to say that it's Rand Paul, but it's something close to that. What's his name? He did the Apple logo. The second one. Saul Bass also did. He had a lot of like line work that was interesting. And movie poster stuff. He did work for Vertigo. And what's the one I'm thinking of? Man with a Golden Arm. Anatomy of a Murder. Dr. Strangelove, he worked on stuff for that. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Is this broadcast? Yeah, the original Apple logo was done by a guy who had like a 5 or 10% in Apple stock. And he was meant to be like the deciding vote between Steve Wozniak, or is it what? Walt Wozniak and Jobs. And then he sold it off before Apple made it big. But he's not like a famous designer. The original Apple logo was more like a it was more like an etching. I work in black and white because I like it. It functions well. It's cheaper than working in color. And when you're going from one device to another, one screen to another, color is a pretty delicate thing, and it varies wildly screen to screen. The Nike logo was first designed by a woman who was a design student, and she got paid like 35 or 70 bucks for it. I don't know the most recent like iconic new logo that's been made. They change a bit as stuff is going, but a lot of logos are rebranding nowadays, where it's not so much a sense of completely new as it is a reinterpretation. And a lot of the time, people don't initially like those sorts of changes. Usually it's made in response to a larger movement or shift in how people consume media, or just stylistically how things are changing, what's new, what's exciting, and what works. So there's a lot of stuff that would have been produced when there was a sort of shifts back and forth between more detail, more solid sort of looking stuff. I don't spend all that much on paper I spend more than the average person, but if you're buying in bulk, the usage or the cost per page isn't as significant. Things change and ebb and flow and shift forward and back. I think as long as you have a good sense of self and can update every couple of years and aren't trying to be on like the cutting edge of things, then I think you're fine. Olá, Raul Figueira. Raul. Hueria. Era artista plástico. Anyway, I think I'm done with the outlines. Which means wrong way to do that. Next comes filling stuff in. This one is 53 frames. Thought it would be closer to 45. 45 frames, but I realized to get it doing what I wanted it to, that I would need to shift that a bit. 53. There are two eyes sometimes because the movement is pretty fast. It's a lot of movement happening in a short period of time. And when you have that in animation, you can do something called a smear or a multiple, double, or something like that, where you duplicate elements or distort elements because the amount of motion that's taking place in that time period is too great. It'll look jittery if you don't include those sort of artificial blurs. If you start paying attention to, let me zoom out a little, to more cartoonish animation styles, stuff like Looney Tunes. SpongeBob has them now and again, but there's something called animation smears. And if you're looking at very fast movements, you can start to see instances where elements are repeated or distorted in a way that's unnaturalistic, but actually conveys a better sense of movement. It's intentional. And so there's sort of blurred elements in other parts of the drawings there, but those are solid areas, and so you can sort of distort the size of them and it's not as distracting. But if you're distorting a line but want to maintain the thinness of it, the quality of it, duplicating it is sometimes a better choice. Let's see if this guy behaves. Getting better at recognizing things, but I still make mistakes. And depending on how severe the mistakes are and where they are within the drawings, I'll either leave it in, redraw the frame, or I might fix it digitally. Sometimes I think something won't be distracting, but then once I see it in the animation, when it's playing back and it is distracting, then I'll fix it digitally. I make mistakes. Sometimes it adds to things, sometimes it takes away. It's just a matter of being able to recognize as best I can when it's distracting and when it's not. Thank you, MMLs, MMLs, for saying that you like my content, stuff that I'm making. Thank you, Juan. Wait, Joan? I don't know. When I import to Photoshop, there's a function you can do under scripts. You can do import files into layers, and that's what I typically do, and then use the animation window and do a make frames from layers, and then export those edited bits because it's easier to edit the individual stills in Photoshop. And thank you for saying very cool. I'll trust you that that is what it means. And then I'll take those files and put them into Premiere, just those individual stills as an image sequence. When I'm actually exporting the video files, because Photoshop can't export to, or I don't know if it can, but I don't believe it does. I don't believe it exports to Media Encoder, and there's far more options in Media Encoder to optimize the files for different platforms and such. So yeah, usually I do import, or not import, scripts. You can do it in After Effects as well. Import an image sequence. But I'm more comfortable editing individual stills and cropping things in Photoshop. After Effects works better for some things, but I've been doing a lot more editing of footage. So like when I edit the process video that I'm recording now of the live stream and do a time lapse of it, I will use Premiere because it's better for chopping up video, just if that's the only thing you're doing is editing timing and stuff like that. It performs a lot better than After Effects for that, because After Effects does like pre-rendering sort of stuff a lot of the time, and that can slow process down and incorrectly inform, can lead to a misunderstanding of how something is actually acting, what it looks like. I haven't checked in a while to see how Brazil is doing with COVID stuff. No, it wasn't doing great for a minute. Hope you're staying safe. But I'm one to talk. The United States has not been doing well either. Now it's hitting rural areas more than it was before, where the initial wave of things was around where I'm at in the Northeast, near New York City. I know I have a number of followers in Brazil because I looked at the insights of stuff. It's like primarily United States, which a lot of that is New York, some LA, and then I think UK. For getting more subscribers, a lot of that was having relationships that I had formed with people, working with brands, and then having those people move and have different things, and doing some collaborations with other people that had more of a following. More recently, it's been by Reels, because Instagram is doing a lot of promotion of Reels because they're trying to compete with TikTok on that sort of stuff. And so they're promoting those, and there aren't as many people pushing to Reels, but because I'm live streaming vertically, I can repurpose that footage for TikTok, where I've gotten a little bit of a following. And then I can just push it to Instagram as well, just have all of these files prepped for different platforms. Yep. So I had a decent following, but it was pretty much anytime I posted something, I'd gain as many followers as I lost. But people are exploring on the Reel page more, and there aren't too many people doing as much work in this format as I am. And so I think it has a different appeal there, and not nearly as consistently, which normally in the past I've not worked this frequently. I've increased in the recent weeks after I was not doing anything, no sort of personal work for a long time, and then I decided to get back in it and live stream more consistently, with the idea of being able to produce unique t-shirts on the daily, having that as like a general format and driver helped, because I like making designs and animations, and I can create designs from the animations that can be on a singular thing and have a consistent updating, stuff like that. You can keep in the chat, it makes it more active. I've never been to the southern hemisphere at all. I think the furthest south that I've been was probably like Cancun area, which that's what it is. I like the idea of having an exposition. I did a group show with some friends a couple of years ago, with my friend. It was 5 people, including myself, that do different animation sorts of things. Zolek, who's a 3D animator, and Sam Cannon, who is a photographer, videographer. I think she likes the term director. I haven't asked her in a while, and I just sort of know what she does. But she works a lot more with live action things than Julian Glander, who he also does 3D animation, but it's much different than what Zolek does. Zolek does a lot more. Well, right now he's been doing a lot more particle simulation stuff. He's more interested in realistic stuff in color and shadow and form and light, where Julian Glander has a lot more cartoonish of a style, and he works in Blender and is a lot looser with his aesthetic. It's not as realistic, and it's emotional, but it's not the same sort of emotional as what Zolak is producing. Zolak makes more somber things. Not exclusively, but that's just a quick thing to describe. If you don't know their work, the difference between the two of them. Julian has a lot more humor in his work. And then Toka Mayer, who does 2D animation but has a different feel to it. It's more like slice of life-ish bits. There's more of an emotional connection and the depiction of daily activities or expressions. It's smaller. It's like small detailed works. She really likes small details. But she does a lot of stuff using tablet stuff. So we did an exhibition as a group. And so we each had one large piece of some kind. And my work was a live painting mixed with sound sort of thing. Which you can find if you search TraceLoops Falling Faces. You can see the performance of that. So that's the most sort of exhibition stuff I've done. And then I did some the place that was hosting us while we were working on that show and had that artist residency, Mana Contemporary. They own a lot of property in Miami, and they had us repurpose the show on a larger scale with additional artists. For Miami Art Week stuff, where everyone kept saying Art Basel, but Art Basel is technically like a showcase of certain works, and Miami Art Week is the broader thing, just in the space in the city. So we did a different version of stuff there with a larger number of artists, and that was called Flatland. And that was a good experience as well. A little bit larger, different audience, sort of away from familiar space. Most of those artists that were included in the other sections of that exhibition are New York based, because Mana is in Jersey City, and it's a location that has a lot of artist studios and houses a lot of work for different museums and galleries in New York City. But it was something of an eye-opener to be in a different location where we weren't as familiar with foot traffic or how people move or go and see artworks, that sort of deal, where we were further from like South Beach, which is where a lot of the concentration of that yearly event takes place. We were downtown, and downtown Miami sort of feels like parts of New York that are historically downtown but are no longer residential, except for some people here and there. And so the people who live in those spaces only have it for practical reasons. Like, no one really lives in downtown Manhattan. People do, but people who do aren't part of that like neighborhood and community in the same way that if you are in Brooklyn or something, where it's primarily a lot of the time it's primarily a residential area. that then has some businesses, restaurants and stuff around it, but it's not like purely office buildings. I think that's how a lot of downtowns have shifted over time, where the people who live there might work there, but it's mostly businesses, office space and stuff like that. So when we went to where we were at in Miami, it was sort of that like older Miami that didn't have much of a nighttime experience there. Like how a lot of downtown sort of, except for some clubs here and there, they're dead after like 8, 9, 10 p.m. I have not always been comfortable having people watch me drawing, and if people were here actively watching me, I wouldn't feel comfortable with it. It took me a bit, just taking the time, learning, and watching other people and realizing what it is that is appealing about it, and that if I want to live stream, I have to have some sort of engagement or presence that's not purely working just because of the speed with which I work. So I got more comfortable after spending more time with it and getting a sense of timing, placement, figuring out how best to have this set up. Took a minute or two. Getting better equipment that sort of doesn't interrupt the space as much. Just in life, I've also gotten better at talking and being comfortable doing things. Like, I'm cool calling to make my own dentist appointment, because what's going to happen? But when I was younger, that would have been, like, I just wouldn't call the doctor for however long. I think that's something that just, as you get older, you get more comfortable. Hello in Dublin. I've never been to Ireland. Say her name is in reference to Breonna Taylor, the woman who was killed in her apartment by police enacting a no-knock warrant that all signs point to the fact that they did not announce that they were police, and then her boyfriend, believing that their apartment was being broken into and people were firing shots at them, fired at police, and they shot back and killed Breonna Taylor. That was in Louisville, Kentucky, where I have friends and family that live there. I lived there when I was younger, in middle and high school. So their name is something of a slogan around victims of police brutality, people who are murdered by the state, to create a greater sense of sympathy and empathy, and not to deny those people who are murdered by the state, to deny them their humanity. Breonna Taylor, part of a series of police killings in the United States within the last year or so. That led to widespread protests. Hello, Jessica. This is not to Jessica, this is to the earlier thing of thanks for answering every question. I tried to answer as many questions as possible. Sorry if yours gets lost or if there's a delay between the question asking and my answering. I try to stay on task, but I get distracted since I'm working and talking, and I also just tend to think in a variety of... I don't think linear, I think kind of linear. I answer something and then it makes me think of something, and so I want to talk on that and keep going. To Simon Doyle. I am streaming using OBS, is the program I'm using to create the stream, and then using something called Yellow Duck to then push that stream to Instagram. So it takes two programs, and I'm not 100% sure if Instagram will continue to allow that to happen or not, because they are here and there about it at times, wanting to have sole control. And if that ends up happening, then I will probably just switch over to Twitch and then push the have the the time-lapse things, and still post time-lapse items and still do YouTube things, but Twitch is a little bit more open to various means of streaming to the platform. Jessica Shu asked how long it takes me to do an animation. It varies a lot. This one is sort of a medium length because it's a longer animation, but it's not particularly complex. So I've been working on this one for just about 2 hours, and I'd say I'm at least halfway through. I've done the animation portion, but filling in these solids takes time. I've drawn some on shoes. I actually did some work for Converse, was one of the first paid things that I had for Converse Music. I animated a shoe, or I animated and transferred it to a shoe. And then recorded the shoe rotating in such a way that the drawings on the shoe animated. Shoes are a little bit intimidating to me just because they're a very active item that have that move a lot, change a lot, and have to deal with a lot of weathering. And so the materials are usually a little bit harder to cleanly illustrate on, and I feel preemptively guilty for not knowing enough about how to best draw onto those materials for how shoes are functioning. So I've done it, but shoes get dirty and worn pretty easily and pretty quickly, so I haven't gone about that. I'm glad that it's soothing, Meadow. I wasn't meant to sound sarcastic or anything. The other thing about drawing on shoes is that It's an expensive canvas. It's an expensive drawing surface. And it's something that I'd have to invest some money into in order to feel comfortable selling it to people. I don't know what the question is, what was the first piece, let me take this out. What was the first piece of art, work of your art you ever did that made you believe in your abilities as an artist? I don't know. When it's more of, I think, just being able to create things at different ages that other people weren't creating. Where if I look back, it doesn't look as impressive, but it's impressive for that age and that sort of perspective. It's weird seeing what things you sort of are impressed by in your past of what you've done. Because things that you were very excited about and thought were impressive, oftentimes you're like, oh, that's just imitating this thing or recreating that, but it might have looked better because you were using some sort of inspiration. But when you look at the things that were perhaps more unique, or different, the things that you might not have had as much confidence in because they were different and a little bit more vulnerable. A lot of the times when I look back, those are the things that I'm most impressed by myself about. What did I draw these with before paint? I'm not sure what you're asking. These I outlined in ink as I went along, and I drew some sketches initially with Sharpie. But if you're asking before, like, I developed this style of things, it would have been digital or using pencil for how I was working. hello in Spain. I'm always tempted to, when people have said that they're from Spain, I just want to say España, but I also want to say it with a Barcelona accent, a bit more Catalan in there. So I want to say España, which I don't know if you find annoying or not. I have not gotten any sort of consensus on that. I haven't heard anyone say like outright like that's very annoying, don't do that, or anyone be like it's just funny. It's like a bad joke. Trying to think of how it would be. I would say hello from the United States in Spanish. It would be, because the direct translation would be like Hola de Estados Unidos. I also was trying to remember what work is, and all I could think of is how to say food. El trabajo. Well, that's I work. Got distracted. Thank you. Gracias. Gracias. I can try to get an accent going. Talked about it before, but my theory is the lazier you are with discerning between letter sounds and syllables in a language, the more authentic your accent will sound. Because most people don't speak very clearly. I don't speak clearly. And so it's hard to hear all those differences in sounds and letters and such. It is not butter paper. This is tracing paper. I had someone from India ask if it was butter paper before, and maybe it's a colloquial thing, but when I looked up butter paper, it's more waxy because it's paper that would be used to hold butter, which is super oily and fatty. But I think if this were butter paper, from what I looked up about it, that it wouldn't hold the ink. The ink would be repelled from the waxy surface. Thank you, AMXCL, for saying that you like my art. Which post are you talking about? Because the most recent one was just outlines and a still. And that took like an hour and a half, maybe? I don't think it took quite that long. Everything that I work on here tends to be a little bit slower than if I did it without talking and having as much of a format, without live streaming. This one is taking probably 3 hours in total. Right now we're looking at 2.5 hours, but I'm in the inking process and sometimes that's slower. I don't think that you've asked if I had pets, but I feel like I've discussed it before. Someone asked, or Reno asked if I had any pets. I have had pets growing up. Second recent post, I'm not sure which one you're talking about specifically. If you want to see it happen in real time and see how long it takes, I post things on YouTube, which is just a recording of these live streams. So if you search TraceLoops on YouTube, then you can see how long it takes for different elements of stuff. And skip around and see how long it's taken for things. Let me get back to Reno's question of whether or not I have pets. I don't currently. I like dogs. I think I'm a little bit allergic to cats. I like cats fine, but a lot of the time I'm not great at training animals because I'm hesitant to enforce anything. I just sort of like letting people and animals do, for the most part, what they want to do or what they seem comfortable doing. And so cats I just sort of hang out around. Depends on the cat, but I get some allergies here and there. And I avoid cats because my girlfriend is more severely allergic to cats. She has more skin issues in general. How did my interest in creating these characters begin? I did a lot of face lines and such, which by that I mean I did contour drawings of things. A contour drawing is a little bit loose for how it gets utilized for describing work, but a contour drawing is doing the outlines, doing line drawings, following the contours of things. And messing with simplified lines and such. I don't know if you're familiar with blind contour drawings, but a blind contour drawing is an exercise, for the most part, that sort of helps teach you things and frees you up a little bit for not having a sense of obligation to do things super precisely. A blind contour drawing, you don't look at the page while you're drawing. So most of the time when I've done them, they've been of people. And what you get are poor proportions. Things are offset and not placed where you think that they are. And so I worked with that for a bit and then started exaggerating things in different ways. This particular sort of character I got more into after trying to create simplified faces that I didn't conscientiously do it in this way, but I can realize now what I was doing was creating simplified faces that were more graphic, but based more on shape than line. And so these sort of based off of different masks from different cultures, and how faces are simplified in their depictions. It's also based off of stuff like an owl, a barn owl specifically, that has this sort of curve to its features that outlines these dark, simple eyes, and there's a lot of contrast in their features. Now going back to, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, and I apologize, but Sajal Gupta asked what number brush I'm using. I'm using one that I don't think has a technical number to it, but it's close to a like 0 round brush. I do have a 0 round brush here that you can compare. They're pretty similar in size. But this is just, I bought a collection of brushes that are pretty cheap because I don't take care of my brushes, and so if I'm able to make these cheap ones work, then I don't have to, I can spend about as much on like 20 of these brushes, if not more, as I would on one round brush that's higher quality. These are a little bit inconsistent brush to brush. They're just like, I bought them for a decent amount of decent number of brushes. It was like maybe 30 in 3 different sizes. These are the large ones. This is the large one that I'm using currently, and then there's a medium and small, or no, this is a medium. But it was like $14 for something like 100 of them, which normally it's like $7 or $8 for a decent 0 round brush. You also said Mr. Gupta. You said that the details are good. Part of that is that everything is kind of loose. So details, it's a weird balance with animation where things have to be generally consistent. Hello in India. Happy belated Diwali. There's a Indian neighborhood not far from here, and I heard them setting off fireworks on Saturday. The other question you had is, what should you do to enhance line quality? Work with line a lot. Try messing with different tools for creating lines. Learn how the tool works and the substrate, whatever surface you're drawing on. Learn how to read that as well and how to understand it, which is something that takes just a lot of time and practice. It's not something that I would know necessarily how to teach. If you're trying to use a brush to create good lines, make sure that your brush has the right amount of ink on it, or paint, or whatever you're using, because that's how you're limited by the tools, but you just have to learn how to feel, look, and read what tools you're using, because every tool has advantages and disadvantages and inclinations to it, what it tries to do, how it behaves well, what you can push it to not do, how much ink you need to create the line quality that you want, what line quality you can get away with on the paper or whatever surface you're using. and whether or not you need to use a different tool entirely to create those lines and such. The image in my icon deal, where is that? Is that there? Or is it there? There's a delay in my video. It's there. Over there. That is a single line. It's cropped from a postcard or something. I was looking for an icon that was distinct and could be read. That comes from messing with blind contour drawings, light painting, and other things. Carolina Huertas, you celebrate Diwali as well. Happy belated Diwali. Someone asked, or Brian Lopez asked, do you use ink, acrylics? Have you thought about incorporating more colors into your work? I typically use ink. I like the feel, the look of it. And Sumi ink is pretty forgiving to brushes compared to what acrylics would do to a brush. When acrylics dry in a brush, you have to like physically remove it. You can't like dissolve it out easily. Maybe you could with acetone. I don't know, because it's plastic of sorts. Anyway, there might be some sort of thing to thin out acrylic paints from brushes, but it's a little bit more cumbersome. I like how thin this ink is. I like thinner stuff because it falls onto the paper and gets soaked into the paper as opposed to building up on top of a surface. About incorporating more color into work, that's not as much my inclination. I like the simplified elements. It forces me to explore the best ways to convey form, and it, for me, creates a stronger connection to the movements and the sense of volume to something that's in a two-dimensional space. I've incorporated color on occasion, but typically it's like an absolute sort of thing. I don't mix colors, at least in these sorts of animations. I also don't like, for animation, you would have to, if you're not working with a found color or something straight out of the tube or bottle or whatever, you have to mix enough for the entirety of the animation, or have some sort of means of creating a consistent color, which is difficult. And daunting as well. I'm also just generally not as good with color. Let me get this done, and then I'll scroll and see what the other questions were. Thank you, Mandela2310, for the heart eyes. Sajal Gupta, apologies again if I'm saying your name terribly. I don't know if I said apologies the first time, but my apologies. Did you make anything for Instagram design? I made a little animation when they updated their logo, but that just was doing it to do it. And then design featured me when they were doing some stuff promoting live streams. That was back like in March or so, because I was doing some live streams, but then I had a larger project come up, and so I wasn't able to as consistently do live streams, which is what I've been doing for the past month or so, taking breaks when I need it, or when I get food poisoning, which happened about a month ago. I only remember that it was about a month ago because 2 weeks and change ago, because I cycled those designs out. I guess it's probably a month ago because I didn't work for about a week. Yeah, when I got food poisoning, I was like, I'm not. Didn't feel up to it. Okay. Thank you, Sofstash, for saying that you enjoy my work. Thank you, Mandela, for using star eyes and hard eyes and saying that you like my work in French. Okay, thank you for saying, or I'm glad that I'm saying it correctly. It's when I'm pronouncing different people's names, I don't know if it's something that people appreciate if I try to do it with correct pronunciation with something of an accent, or if people think that it's like you're doing it wrong and you're sort of creating a stereotype out of the sounds. Also, I'm never 100% sure with different names how J's are pronounced. J'adore ton style de dessin. I can say some words, I think, with a decent French accent, but probably not in general. Hello in France to Soph or Soph Stash, and how to make these faces. I'm not sure what you're asking for or stating for making the faces, Sujal. You can do cross-hatching with brushes. It just depends what you want to try and convey. You can do some shading effect. You can also do dry brush, where you have less ink or paint on the brush and it doesn't make as it skips and doesn't make a solid line or solid form, which gets used in animation at times for animation smears to do motion blur. If you look at things like older Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, Hanna-Barbera things, mostly Looney Tunes is where I've seen it in Tom and Jerry, but you have dry brush and stills to create a sense of motion blur. And then Naminu, I'm not sure how it's intended to read or pronounce your screen name. You ask about, say her name, that's about Breonna Taylor, a victim of police violence in Louisville, Kentucky, who was shot and killed by police in her home. Police were enacting a no-knock warrant. And shot and killed her. And so it's keeping her humanity and seeking justice for those who are killed by agents of the state. And that enact justice, that have a enact not justice, that take actions that result in permanent consequences without due process. In the name of maintaining a status quo. Unfairly and unjustly results in harm to U.S. citizens. Okay. Why am I only making one sheet? Because this is an animation. I will take all of these individual drawings, scan them, and then create a video file that has these as a sequence. In the grand jury for the officers involved, they were found guilty of endangering neighbors. I sometimes work in After Effects. The question was, do you animate or work in After Effects? Sometimes I work in After Effects, but not as much recently as I've gotten more comfortable in Premiere. And Premiere is better for editing down footage. After Effects is good for creating visual effects and stuff like that. But most of the time I'm just editing footage or taking things that exist in a different format and creating video files from that. I'm not doing as much to actually affect the footage itself. I found initial comfort in After Effects because it's formatted more similarly to Photoshop. But once I started editing longer footage and I was doing more editing for timing and stuff like that, as opposed to adding effects to things, I switched to using Premiere more than After Effects. And as far as animating in that program, I've tried in the past, but it takes too long of setup for how I tend to work. And so I've never gotten particularly comfortable working in After Effects to actually animate characters or stuff like that. It makes sense, but the question is, did I color my t-shirt to look like my style? Okay, making sure it wasn't frozen. My webcam has been freezing up now and again. I made a design and had it printed on a shirt. So I did make the design that is on my shirt. Let's see. You can see it maybe a bit better. It's hard to see because it's pretty small detail. And if you're watching with any compression on the video, then it likely just looks like slightly clearer dots in design compared to what you see in the smaller camera. But pretty much exclusively I wear shirts that I've either personally printed, painted, or that I designed. And so, yeah, depends on the length of the animation. This one is 53 frames, unless I accidentally didn't put a number on one of these and miscounted or something, which entirely possible. It's weird how that sounds wrong if I say it the other way. Very possible. But I work at 15 frames per second. So the number of drawings is 15 drawings for every second. That's not how every animator works or every animation works. Some have a higher frame rate. As far as hand-drawn animation, the highest that I know of that people might try to do is 30 frames per second, which would mean double the amount of frames of stills of drawings that I typically work at. Traditional animation stuff is most often 12 frames per second, also known as animating on the twos, and it's referred to as that because film is 24 frames per second, and that's a lot of work to do 24 drawings per second. And so what became the standard was animating on the twos, which means you take 2 images or take 2 stills, 2 frames for every drawing. Thank you. Yeah, it's later in Western Europe. You're however many hours ahead. I think some people, well, it's late in India if Sajal is still watching. Hope that you have a good night. Sajal asked, do I do typography? I studied some typography in college. I don't do much script or hand-drawn type. I don't have great handwriting. I write down things as efficiently as I can, which means that a lot of the time I can't even read it when I look back to it. And it takes me a minute, especially I journal every day. But it's pretty dry. It's just like, today I did this, today I did that. And sometimes I look back and it takes me a bit of time to be able to read what it is that I wrote, because it's, I don't know if you're familiar with the term, but chicken scratch is what it gets when you have bad handwriting, because it just looks like a chicken scratching at something, kicking in the dirt. I'll post, I don't know why, I'd never thought about the fact that some stuff that I produce might be limited in certain countries. The head sculpture that I drew on, not 100% sure which one you're referencing, Reno. There's one that I had that was a wig mannequin that I painted. I was looking for something to house a thermal printer. So Sajal, if you're looking at, I'll post the full real-time version, like this speed, on YouTube. If you search TraceLoops on YouTube, if you do want to get some sleep but you want to watch this process later on, you won't have the interactive element, but you can see it come to fruition, see it get finished. You can look there later on. Yeah, the one that is housing that's one that I did as a personal thing. That came about when, for a bit of time, And I was asked several times about just whether or not I wanted to have access to New York Fashion Week stuff, have uh, access to photograph and go to shows and different things. And I took advantage of that a number of times. Not full advantage as time passed on. I got less excited by the formatting of it all. And it gets a bit repetitive if you're not as interested in the seasonality of fashion and that sort of thing. But so I was curious about, because each season that I went, I wanted to do something somehow different or mess with different things. So taking different kinds of cameras that are a bit more novel, because I don't have the equipment to photograph Fashion Week in a quality that compares with people who are doing work that is for editorials, for magazines and stuff like that. People who have very nice, expensive cameras, because that's what they do for a living, is photograph things. And I had the idea of taking a Game Boy camera and a Game Boy printer, because I thought that was a novel thing that could get some interest from participants, people who are watching models and stuff, that there's something different, something interesting, unique happening there. But I didn't have money that I wanted to spend on a Game Boy camera and Game Boy printer. And when I was looking at like finding paper that still worked and stuff like that, it took a bit of time. Sorry, I was kind of answering in my head a different question. This is a long story to get to the mannequin that I painted. But when I was looking at getting Game Boy camera stuff, it's pretty limiting unless you're hacking it to communicating with it, and I don't have quite the programming or engineering know-how or patience for what I would have been able to create and make with that. The novelty would have been interesting, but the outcome would have been and it's a pretty low resolution camera that doesn't have great low light exposure, stuff like that. But in looking for the supplies and what would be necessary for using a Game Boy camera and printer, I came across someone who had an old Game Boy printer and talked about customizing the printer paper for it, because I didn't know or understand that it was a thermal printer. So a lot of the old Game Boy printer rolls that would still be in existence have aged and aren't as sensitive or have yellowed, stuff like that, because thermal paper is not archival. It doesn't age great. But I found a guy who was like, here's what you could do. You just take a roll of receipt paper, pretty cheap, and you just take a handsaw and cut it down because it's a weird width. He's like, then you just throw it in the Game Boy printer. And that's how it's much cheaper than finding people who have older, what would be the equivalent of expired film, but for thermal paper. And I was like, maybe I could just get a thermal printer, make it cheaper. And so I ended up finding, I wanted one where like I had total control over it. And what I ended up with was using an Arduino to print out stuff onto a little thermal printer. And I was like, I have complete control over this. And it also got me into making 2-bit illustrations, things that could print onto a thermal printer. A thermal printer is like a receipt printer. So it works by, there's a coating placed onto the paper itself that is heat sensitive and turns black when heated. There are some that turn other colors or grayish, whatever. And so it doesn't require any ink. It's just a heat-sensitive paper. And that appealed to me, the idea of like, oh, here's a printer that I never have to refill. And I wanted to have some sort of housing for an interactive piece using the Arduino and the printer, the little thermal printer. And so I was trying to think of what is something that's an interesting housing item that is thin enough to where I could install buttons on it pretty easily. Thin, rigid, hollow. And what I ended up with, I looked around at like thrift shops and stuff, and there was a beauty store, sold like wigs and such, that had just outside of it a collection of mannequin heads, fiberglass mannequin heads. And I was like, this works great. It's hollow, it's rigid, non-conductive. Another good thing for working with electronics. And so I got that drilled into it to make sure that it functioned. And now it houses that little thermal printer. And there's an Arduino inside that now it has, if you're looking on the site and looking at the animation there, that's updating the output to the Arduino in sequence and then recording that printing. But now the program that's on the Arduino produces line drawings that are of a certain length, but all of the drawings all of the sections start and end in the same place. So there's 5 drawings, and they're each tied to one of the buttons. And so each of the buttons that is pushed, each of the drawings that are associated with it, it prints a certain section of drawing that all start and end the same way. So you can press the same button over and over again and it will seamlessly connect. Or you can press what would be like the second button and the drawings themselves are a little bit more complex. But you can press that second button and create a connection on that drawing, and it's the idea of having something modular that the person using the item can press the buttons any order, any number of times, and I still have a good sense of control and stylistically that it's all my contribution to it. But they can have a sense of control, but it's not actual control over the output. It's just the order of things. And then you press a button that finishes the drawing, and it prints out a digital signature onto the paper, and then my contact info. So it says like at TraceLoops, traceloops.com, and whatever else. And so it's on receipt paper. You can press the buttons. It's an interactive piece where the person using it isn't entirely in control or not in control. It's modular. You can make it as long as you want to. It's inexpensive after the initial purchases. Receipt paper, super cheap. I can send you, I think I still have an example of printing on it. But I wanted to make the housing item something interesting and unique that wasn't just like a box or something. And so I got the mannequin and then I painted it white and then drew around it. And now it's an interesting piece that I can use to, when people are like, do you have a business card or something? I'm like, here, check this out. Boop, 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 boop. Not that I'm interacting with anybody and handing business cards off nowadays, but in the past, if people were like, cool, you got a business card, then you have this memorable interaction as well. At least that's the ideal outcome of it all. I don't have it here at my house. It's some studio space that I have that I have not been going to. So that was the last of these guys, which means now I get to scan for a bit. If you are looking for a fiberglass mannequin that's new, they can be pretty pricey, but you can find them sometimes used. With the state of things as they're going and closures of business, you might be able to find fiberglass mannequins relatively inexpensive. You could check something like Craigslist or something. There was one time when I got back from the city late at night. I guess it probably would have been a Saturday night because trash pickup here is on Sundays, and I went past a store that had been closing. That was closing, and there was just a mannequin out on the street, and I was a little bit drunk and had the confidence to just pick it up and take it home. So I have the torso of a mannequin actually over here in the corner, which I can grab and show you. But yeah, fiberglass mannequins, if you're getting them new, can be like several $100s. So in that case, it's not the most cost-effective means of getting that. But yeah, if department stores or clothing shops are closing, a lot of the time they are getting rid of mannequins. So there's a chance you might be able to find one if you're looking for a mannequin to paint and house weird electronics. You can make, I do like the idea of housing electronics and different things, because there's a lot of sense of value and purpose with electronics that is attributed solely to the housing. Okay, if you email me about the T-size, I can let you know how much it would cost for that t-shirt you were asking about. But there are some limitations to what you can use to house electronics, but as long as it's rigid, hollow, and non-conductive, you're typically okay with using odds and ends of things. So, let's grab this guy. This one doesn't set up right on its own. It's a bit dusty because it's just over there. This one also isn't in great shape. This was used at a wig store. And one way you can tell that stuff's used at a wig store is if you look at the head, there's that piece missing right there. Because they put double-sided tape to secure the wigs a lot of the time. Or they might glue it. But if you're ever getting a used wig mannequin head, there's a good chance that it'll have part of the top of the head taken off. The one that I have for the other electronics, that one was one of the few ones that didn't have a crack in the top of its head. But as far as electronics are concerned, at the tail end of last year, start of this year, I had the idea to put some custom electronics inside of old piggy banks. Ah, just got your email. And I did one. So I want to use Canon. Old piggy banks are expensive to come by a lot of the time, and depending on where you're getting them, they might be ceramic, and ceramic is a lot more likely to crack. I had moderate success with Snoopy piggy bank, but I didn't account for how much wiring I was using. It was like a analog synth thing that I made. Which I don't have here either, but I can send... Oh, I already got one for today. Send a link at some point. This is 16 spiral, I guess. Okay. So now we're going to scan. I don't know, Reno, since you've done various electronics and such, if you've ever come across, it's called the Atari Punk console. It's just a noise-making thing that you can house into whatever you want it to be working in. But I messed with creating an Atari Punk console sequencer. It's like approaching modular synth stuff. But I made a sequencer that was housed inside of a Snoopy piggy bank. Except, like I said, about not accounting for how much wiring I was going to have in there. Because I used wiring, I didn't make a custom circuit board. It filled up a lot of space inside. I kind of archived the papers. For what I've been doing this last month, the last 2 months or so, I usually put them in envelopes, manila folders, and then write something loosely descriptive about them, or just have the general dates of stuff, and then put them somewhere. I've got a bunch that are in like manila envelopes that are then inside of a plastic storage box, mostly for moisture and to keep out general bugs, because I've got thousands and thousands of stills and not a consistent means of storing them. They're also different sizes. But every now and again I revisit some old ones and look at them. But back with the idea of housing electronics. If you just have like an interesting thing, you can put whatever in it. There's not too much. Thanks for watching, Sajal. Envelopes are the cheapest and easiest way for me to house things. I think ideally it would be like a well-maintained flat file or something, but flat files are expensive compared to just a bunch of envelopes. I did get your email, and I'll respond sometime today. Thank you for taking the time to look into finding a shirt that you wanted. I have a habit of for watching later. Someone said, take your time. I know myself well enough to know that, like, if I don't respond or do something, like, as soon as possible, then it'll be, like, moderate chance that I'll do it within a decent response time. But when it comes to long term, if I don't do something almost immediately, there's a decent chance that I won't do it for like a month. So I will do my best to respond not in a month. But this is something where it's usually if there's the potential of confrontation or disappointing someone, that I'm far more likely to put off something. Which only, like, compounds. For some electronic circuits, there are some very cheap boxes called Plexo by Legrand, weatherproof and very cheap. And you can put that box inside your art pieces. That's a possibility. Most of my art pieces exist indoors in moderately controlled conditions, so I haven't had too much issue with weather, humidity, or stuff like that. But I appreciate that suggestion. And it would make sense if I was doing something for someone else. I have some pretty chaotic wiring that's dangerous in some stuff that I've created, and I do not allow other people to use it. Not because I think they'll do a poor job, but because I did a bad job of making it on the fly. Learning as I work, and yeah. Getting closer to where I'll have something where you can see the animation. over halfway with scanning. Or I am. Come on and scan. Okay, give me a second, this is acting up. Come on. What's happening here? Come on. Something's acting up with my scanner. That's not cool. Yeah. Something's happening. I don't know. Something that I might have to reset my computer for. Alright, let me see if I have the same issues using an old computer. Alright, let's see. Something's up with the scanner. That's not cool. Sucks. Oh, that's... Let's connect to a wireless computer for a second. Okay. Here's what I'm going to be doing. I will be scanning these and then sending them to my other computer. Other. Desktop. Transfer scans. Normally I'd just reset the computer, but I can't right now because I'm streaming from it. Okay, so this is spiral 600. Figured it out. I figured out a way to do it. I need to reset stuff on this other computer and possibly disconnect the USB hub. But this will work for what I need it to do today. Currently not selling original drawings because I didn't want to get overwhelmed with sales for a period of time, and I just haven't updated things. Most of what I have in the realm of, in the past, what I've done for selling original drawings, because I don't like dealing with shipping, is I bought a bunch of postcards, and if you bought a postcard, do a charitable donation and have that, and then just send you the postcard, because it's super cheap to ship postcards. Hello, Sanum Gundam. But currently that's not up on my website, but can do original drawings. I just need to figure out more of, like, what size original drawing would you want or be interested in. The main thing I'm concerned about with sending us documents is that sometimes those get folded or stuff. I have to buy a rigid envelope, which isn't so bad. I've shipped small prints, and then you can also, if it's larger, roll it. Yeah, it's not so bad. I just, for custom drawings, would want to make sure it's what you're looking for. Hello, your glow. Hello, Kara, or K. Marie. Almost there. Kyra. Hello, Kyra. Kira. Maybe it's Kira. Sorry for saying your name a bunch of different ways. Kira? Okay. Few more scans. Then I get to transfer these images over. I'm doing fine. How are you doing, Kira? Got a little bit frustrated and anxious because I was worried I'd be unable to use the scanner, that the scanner itself was broken, but I think it's just a temporary problem. But I need to restart my other computer, my primary computer, and it's not doing so hot. And I can't restart it while I'm broadcasting without ending the broadcast and the recording, and it's much easier to work with if I don't do that. Okay, so quit out of image capture. That bit. Rename all of these. Name 29 items. Counter. And those guys. Now I need to get an airdrop guy going. Find these bad boys. MacBook Pro. Send these guys over. Okay, downloads. Grab these bad boys. Throw them over here. And it's starting at everything looks good. Okay, now let's Photoshop running. Get that. File scripts. Load files into stack. Browse. Name going. 53. That means that I've got a duplicate somewhere in there, I think. But we got that going. And display capture. Oh, sorry, I didn't read. Luis Ventosa said hello, and then these days that I am the example of preservation. That's very nice. Are you some kind of creative process to achieve something bigger? It's just working in a different capacity and fashion. It's not exactly something bigger, it's more greater sense of consistency. Okay. Where is that? There. And it should start at 30. General crop. Give it a moment. Hello, Juan. Okay. Create frame animation. Make frames from layers. Somehow I duplicated one of these. Reverse these frames. Change the time. Don't crash. 0.1 seconds. Let's just see it at a faster speed in just a moment. Save that out. Turn off display capture. Get an image in here. Browse and grab that guy. There you go. Questions, concerns, comments, curiosities. There's a bit of compression in the video you're getting there, but let me just write the date over here. 11/16/20. And then that goes into live stream November. These are not well organized files once you get inside. Alright, any thoughts, concerns, comments, curiosities, questions? Hello, Eduardo. You can do this faster digitally. There aren't other concerns or thoughts or such, then I'm going to head out and process some of this work for exporting to other formats. So I'll give you guys like a minute if you have any other questions. These are newer glasses. Hey Hayden. They're ones that I got for like $20 online. I was curious about having a distinct shape that's a little bit more geometric. When I first put them on, I thought I looked like a studious mouse. I was like, I look like a mouse that is in a library in something or other. And I also thought I looked much more British. Yeah, curious about glasses and I want to see circles, so I got some circles for like $20. And with prescription lenses, you can get some that are cheaper, but not the ones that were this circular. I really should get a new prescription soon, but I don't feel super comfortable going to an optometrist and putting my face into something that other people are putting their face into. I also need like a full eye exam. get either puff of air or the dilated pupils. Yeah, so no other questions other than new glasses. I got my old ones sitting over there. Then I'm going to head out and make this all time-lapse appropriate and size and stuff, and then make some sort of shirt out of this design that might omit a frame or two, because 53 I think might be a prime number and I can't make a grid easily out of that. Thanks, King Hobby. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna head out. Thank you all for watching. This comes in just under 4 hours, which means that I'm not going to get cut off by Instagram's 4-hour restriction, which is the sort of thing that I feel like I'm the only person I know who's going to do that. Okay, thank you all for watching.